Well, good evening. This is another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw. We're going to talk about why California should be independent from the federal government. This show's about independence and secession movements around America, what's going on, staying up on the affairs of them. But it's also dedicated to why specifically should California be independent? Well, there was some big news that came out recently. We're going to cover it here right now. Basically, the point of this show is going to be that the American Supreme Court will destroy all of California's values. Californians cannot have the laws that they want to uphold our values as long as we're part of the American legal system. I'll explain why. So let's get right into it. Here it is, the Washington Post, the inescapable minoritarianism of overturning Roe. So obviously you heard the Supreme Court in a leaked draft decision, not the final decision, which was very unorthodox for them to leak a draft decision, is planning on overturning Roe v. Wade, the landmark decision that guaranteed the right to abortion to every woman in America. There are inherent trade-offs of condensing the political power of 330 million people to 435 of them. That's the Congress. The exacerbation is the Senate, of course, 2 senators. Is there something that a Wyoming that warrants her having 68 times the power of California? So they're already pointing out that California gets an unfair advantage with America. Basically, rarely, though, will the system structure so obviously have rewarded a minority of Americans as it would if the Supreme Court overturns the decision of Roe v. Wade. To reach a point where the decisions legalizing abortion is on the brink of being rescinded required a cascade of victories by the minority and would be affected despite a majority of Americans hoping it doesn't happen. So they're going to be able to overturn Roe v. Wade, and it doesn't matter if a majority of Americans don't like that, because that's not how democracy works in America according to the Constitution. Then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made a tactical decision to simply refuse to allow President Barack Obama to fill Scalia's seat, an aggressive move that most Americans rejected. So most Americans wanted a Supreme Court justice to be picked. Mitch McConnell, who was part of the minority party, said, no, we're not going to do that. Then a Republican who was not the majority vote winner became in power. That's Donald Trump, and he appointed all these judges to the Supreme Court. And so you have a minority party is able to block Supreme Court justices getting in because they're part of the Senate, and a minority party was able to appoint Supreme Court justices because Trump won the election because of the Electoral College, and a minority party is able to have their wishes about American law done because they own the Supreme Court, because Donald Trump appointed a bunch of federal Supreme Court justices to it, and the Senate, controlled by the Republicans, allowed them in. So a minority party controlled the Senate. They were able to allow these federal judges to be appointed. A minority party got the president in. He appointed those judges, and then they got into the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is actually enacting the will of a minority, not the majority. But because of the Constitution says the president can pick the justices, and the Senate has to approve them. And the decisions by the Supreme Court are final. So what they're pointing out is that you have this minority party, they got a president in, even though he didn't have the popular vote. And then you had a minority party that wasn't the majority party, but because they own the Senate, they were able to block other liberal Supreme Court justices. And because they approved the justices Trump put in, now the Supreme Court is very conservative to the point that it represents the will of a minority of Americans and does what they want, and there's literally nothing that can be done about it. That's what the Washington Post is saying. The inescapable minoritarianism of overturning Roe. That's what they're talking about. But they're not alone. Let me show you this. I know it's the paywall, but I'll show you the quote. California is hardly over, but we need big changes. This was made in 2019. Sorry, I know paywall, right? By Jonathan Taplin. Jonathan Taplin, December 1st. Okay, 2019. Here is what Jonathan Taplin said. Now, Jonathan Taplin is the Director Emeritus of the Annenberg Innovation Lab at USC, and he said this in 2019. It's a good thing California's finances are in good shape because we can expect no help or guidance from the federal government, even if a progressive wins the White House. As Norman Ornstein of the American Enterprise Institute had pointed out, by 2040 or so, 70% of Americans will live in 15 states, meaning 30% will choose 70 senators. And the 30% will be older, whiter, more rural, more male than the 70%. In other words, the Senate could well be controlled by a conservative minoritarian for years to come. That's from Jonathan Taplin, and this is the article in the LA Times that he wrote it in 2019. Here's what he's, oops, sorry, let me show you. You probably need to see the screen to know that's there. That's from Jonathan Taplin. This is the article that he wrote where he said that. And basically what he's talking about is this. This is something I wrote in 2018, 4 years ago. By 2040, democracy in America will be dead. If you think the battle between coastal liberal populations and rural conservatives is bad now, it's only going to get worse. Every year, the conservative rural interior of America will have more power, and the areas of America where the population lives will have less power. This means by 2040, the Senate will probably not represent the American people to a shocking degree. American presidents like Trump, who are super extreme compared to the average America, will become the norm. Extremists who have opinions out of touch with most America will routinely be appointed to the Supreme Court. Here's the Norman Ornstein hypothesis. He said this in July 2018. I want to repeat a statistic I use in every talk. By 2040 or so, 70% of Americans will live in 15 states, meaning 30% will choose 70 senators, and that 30% will be older, whiter, more rural, and more male than the 70%. Unsettling to say the least. That is what Professor Jonathan Taplin was pointing out to in his article here in 2019, was that the year before in 2018, Norman Ornstein, a demographer, said this. Other people were agreeing with him. I will not bore you with the details, but here's the article. He wrote it in 2018. This is what it's talking about. So the blue dots are where the population is. The gray dots represent the other 30% of the population. So blue dots are going to be 70% of the population in the future. Gray dots are 30% of the population. Here's the problem. There are more states represented by the gray dots than there are states represented by the blue dots. The United States, in other words, is barreling towards a future where a younger, multicultural, more urbanized majority is ruled by an aging, white, rural minority. That's a recipe for civil unrest or even a secession crisis. That's from Think Progress, was saying, having a minoritarian group rule over you might be a reason why people would secede. Jonathan Taplin said, we should be ready to handle business on our own. That was the point of his article. So there's already people talking about how the demographics of America work and that secession might be an option. Might cause a secession crisis. That's from Think Progress when they were talking about Norman Ornstein's demographic hypothesis. Okay, so this is international migrants on top of the people who voted for Trump. This is areas where people have a high percentage of seniors. So the area that's really dark in this map is where people are very old and have little to no immigration. So that's at least 18 states that are like that. Here is the map that allowed Donald Trump to win. As you can see, a majority of the states are red, not blue. That majority of the states, even if they're less than half the population, gets 2 senators, which means they control the Senate. They also get the Electoral College, which means they control the presidency. And as we talked about, once you have the presidency of a party and the Senate of a party, the president can nominate justices and the Senate can approve those justices, so that you have radical justices sitting on the Supreme Court. And all it takes is control of the presidency, which can happen by a minority population. We saw them with George W. Bush and Donald Trump, and a Senate that represents a minority population. We just saw that recently. That's how the Supreme Court justices got into the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. And there you go. Here's the blue states represent a majority of the population. The gray states represent everything else. And the red line is who voted for Trump. So a majority of the gray states voted for Trump. And they are the minority population. And they will control everything because of the way the Constitution works. Almost all of the low population American states that will control the future of America all voted for Trump in 2016. So the point is, the Constitution gives power to the states. It says each state gets 2 senators. So if you have 35 states, you have a majority of the Senate, even if you're 25% of the population. The Senate approves all Supreme Court justices. The president is elected not by a popular vote, as we saw, but by an electoral college vote. This is how George W. Bush came into power twice. This is how Donald Trump came into power. So in the last 20 years, we've seen more presidents elected through electoral college success than popular votes. The electoral college favors the states. So the states get an outside benefit influencing who's the president. They get to choose who's the Supreme Court, and they get to control the Senate. And that's how you can have 35 states who are a minority of the population get Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court and overturn laws that a majority of the population is against. Because you can have someone be president who a majority of the population was against. And you can have a party in control of the Senate and in control of who gets to be on the Supreme Court that a majority of the population doesn't support. And that's why Jonathan Taplin said, this is bad, and California should be ready to go on their own. And this is why Think Progress said some people would look at that and consider seceding. Here's the article again. I said that in 2018. Here is the Washington Post today saying it in the year 2020. I said this in 2018. I made a video about it in 2020. Washington Post 4 years later picks up on the same thing and goes, wow, that's a problem that a minority group can control the presidency and the Senate and then influence the Supreme Court and then pass laws that a majority of Americans don't want, especially Californians. But that is the law in America, and that's not going to change. This is the way demographics are going. Nobody who's young, gay, immigrant, or progressive thinking wants to live where the gray dots are. They want to live where the blue dots are. All the youth are going to the blue dots. All the immigrants are now scared of going to the interior of America because of Trump and because the interior of America voted for Trump, and now they're going to the blue dots. All the LGBTQ is going to the blue dots. All the people who want interesting jobs are going to the blue dots. And what that leaves is the gray dots with old white people who are never challenged on their ideas and never deal with diversity. And they will be a majority of the states, and then therefore they will have control over the federal government, even if it's not what a majority of the population wants. We literally just saw that happen with the Supreme Court on Roe v. Wade. But here's another one. Everybody's talking about Roe v. Wade, but the Supreme Court also did this. It says you can put Christian flags on top of government buildings. Now, separation of church and state was something that I had always considered key to American values. Not anymore. So the Supreme Court for the first time said, yes, you can put a Christian flag on that government-funded building. This is the same Supreme Court that said, yes, you can ban abortions. So they're doing multiple things that are against California values, putting religious flags on government buildings and banning the right to abortion. That's two different things because they're a minority-controlled Supreme Court party. Jonathan Taplin warned us about this. In 2019, he was not the only one. Joe Matthews, in last year, said that there is a bias against California from the Supreme Court. It isn't even bothering to disguise the anti-California bias. So Joe Matthews covers politics in California for 3 decades, and he's saying the Supreme Court's biased against us. So he's talking about how the Supreme Court is against us, and they strike down decisions like our COVID restrictions. By the way, the justices treated California coming on the heels of the recent anti-California decision in cases involving churches and COVID-19, restrictions like Harvest Rock Church versus Newsom. So we had restrictions on who could come together during COVID-19 so that we didn't die. The Supreme Court struck that down. So that's another thing the Supreme Court also struck down, in addition to abortion rights and in addition to not having religious flags on government buildings. Americans have long celebrated a constitutional system that discriminates against California and other large states by giving us too little representation in the Senate and making our votes worth less in presidential elections. That's exactly what I was talking about. With each state gets 2 people in the Senate, and they get the Electoral College, which gives 35 small states outsized influence in comparison to California. And does that mean California must accept the open bias of the highest court in the land? Well, here's the thing. As for the current justices, here's a warning. Respect for the law is foundational, but respect for judges is conditional. If you persist in open bias against their state, don't be surprised if citizens defy your rulings, seek to remove you from the bench, or change forever the court on which you sit. If you persist in open bias against their state, don't be surprised if citizens defy your rulings. That's what Joe Matthews said last year about a Supreme Court that was biased against California and striking down our values. He's not the only one. So Dan Walters said this in 2020. Could California really go it alone? And he was talking about how the federal government was not backing up California on climate change. And Newsom's predecessor, Jerry Brown, was easily the most active governor in forging what amounted to a separate international relations policy, spectacularly symbolized by participating as a de facto head of state in global conferences on climate change. The separateness of California from the federal government obviously widened when Donald Trump became president, especially during the first 2 years of his presidency when Republicans controlled both houses. But it's always been there, regardless of the White House occupant. The separateness of California from the federal government obviously widened when Donald Trump became president. It is still widened because of the judges he put in. So this other political commentator, so here's Joe Matthews saying, wow, we're out of line with what the federal government wants. Maybe we should defy them. That's Joe Matthews. Here you go. He said it last year. And then here's Dan Walters, another columnist. He said it the year before. And what he said was, wow, the federal government seems to be really at odds with California. What was Dan Walters' solution? It raises, not for the first time, the question of whether California could or even should go it alone. It's basically what Joe Matthews is saying. Nullification was the idea that if we don't like a Supreme Court ruling or a law, we can just ignore it. That's what Joe Matthews is saying when he says this. Nullification was last seen in 1861, right before the Civil War. So secession came after nullification. The South wanted to say, well, we'll just strike down laws that we don't like. When they were forbidden from doing that, then they moved to secession. Nullification came first. Joe Matthews is suggesting nullification because he doesn't like the federal Supreme Court and he thinks it rules against California values, literally, as we just saw today, against the Roe v. Wade ruling. And the Christian flags on buildings ruling, and the coronavirus protections ruling being struck down. And then Dan Walters, another person, says, California is really out of line with what the federal government wants. Maybe we should think about becoming our own country. Let me show you this. They're not alone. This is Blaze Media. It's a conservative one. Horowitz, 5 observations and outcomes of the Supreme Court's likely reversal of Roe v. Wade, May 3rd, Daniel Horowitz. Scroll down, wait for it. Overall, when factoring in the likely decision as well as the politics behind the reprehensible leak of the draft, it has become clear that we cannot live together harmoniously as one people. Ironically, Alito's draft opinion actually sets the stage for an amicable divorce. The left will stop at nothing to force their will upon us in all 50 states. We simply want at least a third of the country where we can live in peace with the values and legal system established by our founders. They want to use the court as a sword. We are only using them as a shield. So this decision by the Supreme Court could lead to amicable divorce. That means secession. That's what the Blaze is saying. That's also what Joe Matthews said. He didn't say secession, but he said nullification, which is damn close to secession. In fact, it's the stage right before. And that's what Dan Walters also said, was, hey, if California's out of line with the federal rulings, maybe we should think about going it alone. Especially when we see the Supreme Court doing this and doing this, and that it's not going to get better. There's nothing you can do unless you're going to actually move people to those states and repopulate them with Californians. By the way, Californians moving out of California is nowhere near the numbers you would take. You probably have to get like half of our state population to leave and move to places like Iowa and Nebraska. So, hey, if you can convince 50% of the California population to get up and move to Iowa and Nebraska, we can stop this. But if you can't do that, you're screwed. 35 states are going to run everything. They're going to have the minority opinion. We had professors in California warning you about this in 2019. And now here's the Washington Post saying, yeah, there's a group of minority people in power because of the Constitution. And now they run the Senate and they can run the presidency and then they can run the Supreme Court. And now they can destroy all of our values that we care for, as I explained 4 years ago. But let's not also forget that federal courts struck down many of California's gun laws. The federal court struck down our high-capacity magazine laws. Let me get that for you real quick. I'm having a little bit here you go. In a polarizing decision on Friday night, a federal judge struck down California's 32-year-old ban on assault weapons, ruling it violated America's constitutional right for gun self-protection. This happened in June 2021, so last year. So this was the lower court. It wasn't the Supreme Court, but it was a federal court with a conservative judge who said, California laws, you don't get to have those to protect yourself. So you've seen where the courts strike down our laws on Roe v. Wade. They strike down our laws on separation of church and state. They strike down our laws on high-capacity magazines and guns. And then they also strike down our laws on COVID protections. We passed those gun laws to keep ourselves alive and not dead. We passed those COVID protection laws to keep ourselves alive and not dead. They struck those down. So literally, we cannot have, on 2 occasions, the laws that we wanted to keep ourselves alive. Roe v. Wade, the legal right to abortion, is a value all Californians agree with. Separation of church and state and not picking Christianity over any other religion is a value all Californians support. And those were also struck down. And that's the point. We predicted this years ago in Cal Exit. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Every year, 35 states, 40 will become more white and rural and undiverse, and they will be more conservative, and the Supreme Court will do more of what they want, and the presidents elected by them will not be supported by the majority, and they will be even more extreme because they're speaking to minority base to win. And the Senate will become even more extreme in what it does because, again, as this group keeps shrinking and becoming isolated without new ideas and different people speaking to them, they're going to become more unto themselves, more radicalized, and more alt whatever they are. And that means Trump or his predecessor or who comes after him will be worse. And Mitch McConnell in the Senate or whoever comes after him will be worse. And the Supreme Court justices are just getting warmed up, and they're going to be striking down even more of your laws. And there's literally nothing you can do about it unless you're willing to get 20 million people to move to 35 states they don't want to live in. And the reason this is this way is because of demographics, the way population is moving. And it's not going to peter out till the year 2040 or when NASA says there's going to be a colony on Mars. So you can secede and have your own legal regime where your laws that you pass to protect your lives stay up and the laws that you expect to protect your values stay up. Or you can deal with 20 years of this. I said it 4 years ago. Washington Post is now saying it today, the exact same point.